The House is set to vote today on establishing a commission to investigate the January 6th Capitol assault. The bill, a bipartisan effort, is expected to pass the House today, but Republicans remain divided over it. Yesterday, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy said he does not support the commission, arguing it would interfere with efforts already underway in Congress to study the attack. Meantime, the bill's future in the Senate remains uncertain. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell told reporters yesterday that Republicans in that chamber are still taking a wait-and-see approach.
We are undecided about the way forward at this point. We want to read the fine print, and if the majority leader puts it on the floor, we'll react accordingly.
For more on this, let's bring in CBSN Washington reporter Caitlin Huey-Burns. So, Caitlin, I guess let's just talk a little bit about how we ended up here. The bill, when it was first formulated and agreed upon, Republican John Katko of New York agreed to, or I should say, the Democrats agreed to what the Republicans wanted to see in that bill as represented by John Katko. I don't understand now why House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy is coming out against it. It strikes me that he might be throwing Katko under the bus, because why would Katko say, yeah, we're good with this, and all of a sudden have the minority leader come out and say we're not good with it, and now we're hearing Steve Scalise is going to whip all the members of the Republican Party to vote against this. I don't help the American people understand how this would happen.
That's right, Vlad. There's been a lot of back and forth on this bill. Teams have been negotiating for months about what this commission would actually look like. And original proposals much more favored the Democrats. And then, as you mentioned, Republican John Katko, who represents a district in upstate New York. Remember, he's one of the few in the House Republicans that voted to impeach the president. He comes from a district that voted for Biden, voted for Hillary Clinton, but voted for him as a Republican. So a very tight swing district there. And he and the Homeland Affairs Committee Chairman Benny Thompson got together and they found an agreement that actually included a lot of what Republicans wanted to see. So here's how the committee would break down under the proposal that these two bipartisan lawmakers came up with. It would be evenly divided among Democrats and Republicans, 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans. Now, Democrats, because they control the House, would be able to pick the chair. So Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer would pick the chair of the committee, and Republicans would pick the vice chair. Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell would pick the vice chair. And what's really important here, and what was seen as a concession to some of the Republican proposals or wants from this, is that it allows, it makes sure that both the vice chair and the chair agree on who they want to subpoena. So this is a committee that has subpoena power, but either the vice chair and the chair have to agree on those subpoenas, or the majority of the committee has to agree on those subpoenas. So it's not as if Democrats can kind of go wild here with subpoena power. So it does raise the question of, okay, if Katko was able to negotiate this agreement that a lot of Republicans up here on Capitol Hill have signaled that they want to support, why would McCarthy do this? Well, we know a week ago, remember, just a week ago today, we were talking here on Capitol Hill about them forcing out Liz Cheney from leadership. This came as Republicans on the Hill had started to downplay those January 6th attacks. You have former President Trump continuing every week to falsely make lies about the election, and this is an effort really by Republicans to kind of not want to focus on what happened in January. But it does raise the question of if you have members who are willing to work across the aisle, does this deter anyone from doing that? And also, does it place pressure on some of those Republicans that need to keep their seats in order for Republicans to be able to take over the House? So a lot of dynamics here at play. It's expected to pass the House, but also remains a sticking point in the Senate. A key thing to watch today is what the breakdown of the vote is. Last night, the Problem Solvers Caucus came out and endorsed the bill, and that means that there are about almost 30 Republicans in that caucus. That could give them some political cover to vote for this bill. And if there is wide bipartisan support for this bill, does that place pressure on Republicans in the Senate to go ahead and support it as well?
Well, yesterday we actually saw hope for bipartisanship, a little sliver of hope. The House passed a bill to address the increase in hate crimes against Asian Americans during the pandemic. It was a rare moment of bipartisanship in the Congress with passing this bill. How significant is this?
Absolutely, Anne-Marie. That is a very rare moment of bipartisanship. The bill passed the Senate with just one Republican opposing it, Josh Hawley, and passed overwhelmingly in the House yesterday. So it's now headed to Biden's desk for signature, and this is something that he has applauded and is expected to sign. And this is significant because we saw the rise in hate crimes against Asian Americans in light of coronavirus, a really troubling development here. And this is a bill that would speed up the convictions and give the Department of Justice kind of a fast track way to consider these hate crimes, as well as some other measures. So an important sign of bipartisanship here on Capitol Hill, and a rare one considering everything that we've been talking about.
So President Biden, Caitlin, has given lawmakers a deadline to pass a police reform bill by May 25th. Which would mark the 1 year since the killing of George Floyd. Where do things stand after negotiations resumed yesterday?
That's right. At his address to Congress a few weeks ago, Biden said that he wants to get a police reform bill, the negotiations finished by May 25th, which would be, of course, that first anniversary. That's next week. So that is very unlikely that they will meet that deadline set by or proposed by the president. But what's really interesting here on Capitol Hill is that this is an issue where you do see the bipartisan negotiators really trying to work in good faith with one another. They've been very quiet about what exactly they are talking about. There are a couple sticking points. The chief among them still remains that protections for police officers when it comes to civil suits. That remains a key sticking point. But you do have both sides working on this and trying to get to a solution. Meanwhile, you have efforts underway at the state level as Congress is still taking its time with this. Washington State, for example, Governor Jay Inslee just yesterday signed a bill into law in his state with sweeping police reform proposals. So we may start to see kind of a patchwork in the states. And does that apply more pressure on Congress? Of course, we know time is always of the essence here on Capitol Hill.
So also yesterday, the president took a show on the road pushing his infrastructure proposal. He was in Michigan at a Ford plant yesterday, and he said, look, he's willing to compromise with lawmakers, but what he's not willing to do is nothing at all. I want to play a little of that sound.
The Vice President and I have had a number of meetings in the Oval Office with Republican leaders in Congress and members of Congress. We believe we can find a bipartisan deal on infrastructure, but we made one thing clear. We'll compromise, but doing nothing is not an option. Doing nothing is not an option.
So here's the thing. We know that the two sides, there's a wide gap in terms of just how much this infrastructure bill would cost, but also just like what should be called infrastructure and what shouldn't be called infrastructure. What do we know about the president's counter proposal or willingness to compromise?
That's exactly right. These sides are still very far apart, even though they are continuing negotiations. What happened yesterday was Shelley Moore Capito, a Republican here on Capitol Hill, senator from West Virginia, who's been leading the bipartisan discussions among Congress, had a meeting yesterday with administration officials, with some cabinet members, including Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, and also members of kind of the working group, the Republicans working on this proposal. They say they are working on something to get to the president. Remember, last week they met with President Biden, and then he asked them to come up with more details, especially on how to pay for this. But the sticking points remain the same. Republicans here on Capitol Hill say that they don't agree with what Biden describes as infrastructure. Remember, Biden's proposal includes, obviously, changes and investments in roads and bridges and traditional infrastructure, but it also includes investments in many social programs to be able to get the economy back working again is their argument. Republicans don't agree with what that definition of infrastructure is. They want to keep this much more narrow, and also it's much smaller than what the president has proposed. But remember, Biden is someone who campaigned on bipartisanship, hasn't really gotten it yet. He didn't get it on the COVID relief bill. Does this show that he wants to get something done in terms of bipartisanship? Or, he's also facing a lot of pressure from progressive Democrats who want him to go big and bold, especially with the midterms around the corner and the uncertainty about whether Democrats can hold on to the House and Senate.
All right, Caitlin Huey-Burns, thank you very much.
Thank you.